Now, if you're on Twitter, you can follow the conversation we're having today by following @recruitingblog or #ourdaily. And of course, I have to take a quick moment to give a shout out to our sponsor, HackerRank. Thank you so much for sponsoring this webinar, giving us a chance to preach the good word on working with your hiring manager. Now, I'd like to introduce you to one of my very favorite people, Amy Miller. So you can see here, she's a recruiter at Microsoft. You can find her on Twitter @recruiter. But something that you might not know about Amy is that she is really smart, really witty. She's on top of her stuff, and she's really honest about her experiences in recruiting. And I think that's why she's such a great presenter to talk about this, because she's going to tell you about the times that she has cried at her desk, just like you have. And she's going to talk about the times where she hit a wall with frustration. But she's also really tactical about fixing stuff. So with all that said, I'm going to shut up and let Amy share her 15+ years of recruiting experience and how she has made working with hiring managers bearable throughout all those years. All right, take it, Amy.
Thank you so much, Katrina. I'm dying because y'all may not know, but Amy's smart. That may have not come
Hey, if
through.
they don't know you.
No, I think it's great. Thank you so much. And, you know, Katrina and I have this little mutual admiration society going on. You're absolutely one of my favorite people, and I don't like very many people, so that says something. But thank you so much for having me on again today. And this is another really pet topic of mine. We have beat the salary negotiation drum. We will continue to beat that, but that's not what we're talking about today. Today is about building that relationship with the hiring manager. So we had just a super quick agenda, but really this is going to be kind of a free-flowing conversation with some very specific points that I want to make. One of the things that I do always want to leave you with, though, is some actual things that you can turn around and go to your desk and immediately pick up the phone, draft that email, walk into that meeting with something that you can do as a result of listening to us talk today. So there will be some very specific things at the end that I hope you guys can take right back to your desk and do something with. So with that, let's just jump right in. So why does partnership matter? Depending on the kind of people that you're recruiting and the company that you work for, you might be agency, you might be an internal, you know, why does it really matter, right? Like, I've got my gig, I do my thing, and then in my case, I recruit engineers, my engineering managers, they're doing their thing. I don't know anything about writing code. How am I supposed to work with them? Well, it does matter. It does matter because we're going to be asking them to do some stuff for us, and we're also going to be setting up some boundaries and really creating this environment where hopefully we can not only get things done, but get things done better. So reason number one, pure and simple, we are focused on the same goal. Right? If you have a hiring manager and you have a position to fill, right there, what that says is that we're looking to solve a business problem. We're looking to hire a person. We're looking to put a butt in a seat. Whatever it is, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a truck driver, there's a business problem that needs to be solved. There's work that's not happening because we need this person, and hopefully a great person that's available, that we can afford, and that's going to stick around for a while. So it's not just the hiring. It's not just the, hey, I made a placement, but it's looking at that long-term solution and hopefully helping drive a little bit of retention. Another reason that you really want a strong partnership with your manager, you've got to set some boundaries, okay? A lot of us come into this business by accident. There's no rule book. There's no agenda from some, you know, overarching agency. Like, nobody puts down rules for recruiting, and nobody says that these are the practices and the things that you have to do. So a lot of times we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. You know, there are some general guidelines, you know, be a good person, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, but, you know, some recruiters don't follow that either. So there you go. But again, looking at setting those boundaries and figuring out how do you best work the partnership and get the hiring manager on the same page with you. And finally, having that bond with your hiring manager and having that sense of, hey, we're playing for the same team helps you get stuff done. We'll talk a lot more about that and specifically what I mean there, but really, if you can call somebody up and ask for a favor because they know you and like you and trust you, you're a lot more likely to get that favor than if it's just someone you cross paths with in a mandatory monthly meeting. All right, it's really important to divide and conquer in this scenario. This was something that was really hard for me to wrap my head around, and I probably spent a good 10, 12, 13 years of my recruiting career really pushing against this and really trying to own everything related to recruiting. I didn't want to let go of anything. It was really important to me to be able to control, that's a funny word for a recruiter to use, to control every part of the process. Well, newsflash, you can't control much of anything except yourself, right? So it's really, your life will be so much better if you just figure out how to let go of some things and how to divide and conquer. So what does that maybe look like? This is my own personal experience. This entire webinar is based on a cautionary tale of my life, but I think hopefully you'll find some relevance for you in some ways that you can put this in practice on your own desk. So if we're dividing, what does that look like? I'm actually going to start with the hiring manager. The hiring manager has to own the position. They have to own that business need. I need a person who can do these things and has this level of experience, and this is what they're going to do. And they have to really own that. We can't necessarily come in and create that for them. We can advise. We can tell them what's reasonable and what's not reasonable, but they need to own that. I don't know what kind of an accountant my director of finance really needs. I don't know what the business problem they're trying to solve is. They do, so let's talk about it and I can help them get there. But he or she's got to really own that position. Sometimes that even comes down to a process. You need to open said position into our recruiting tool so that I have a rec for which having candidates apply and so on. So sometimes it's even just a matter of kind of the paperwork on the back end. But again, more broadly, they need to be the ones to really take ownership of what do I need, why do I need it, which is exactly point 2. What do I need? Why do I need it? What happens if I don't have it? So all of these questions have to be answered, and all of these things surrounding the actual position or the type of talent that we're looking for this person or for this team. The manager really needs to own that and be willing to give you that level of detail and insight. I personally think managers have a responsibility to help feed the pipeline. This is a new revelation for me. I've spent many years, kind of smacking fingers and hands off and stay out of my candidate pool, and that's really kind of dumb, right? And I'll go back to the engineering piece. I recruit engineers. I don't know anything about software development. I am not an engineer. I don't want to be an engineer. But I understand that my company needs them. I understand my team is looking for them. So who knows engineers? Who hangs out with engineers after hours? Who went to school with engineers? Not me. Okay? I know them professionally and through a pipeline I've developed and through a network and former candidates and referrals and so on and so forth. But the manager's directs, the people the manager works with, these folks all probably know engineers. They probably went to school with other people like them, and they probably have social interactions with people like them. It's just how we are as human beings. If you ask me to refer recruiters to you, I can come up with 5 names off the top of my head in 10 seconds. If you ask me to refer accountants to you, I don't really play in that world, so I'm really going to have to kind of stop and think about it. And, of course, being a recruiter, I have a leg up, but they're not people that are in my immediate network for referral. Not the case with your hiring team. They should know these guys. They should be running with these guys. So they have a responsibility to feed the pipeline. It's up to us to help them know how to do that. And then finally, hiring managers need to be available, okay? There needs to be some time given to the recruiting process. I need an hour of your time every week, or whatever it is. You'll have to kind of figure out what that cadence looks like for you. But they need to be invested in this, and they need to be willing to put forth, okay, I'm going to give you however much time it is for whatever kinds of discussions. We'll talk a little bit later about what those calls might look like. But again, really get them to understand you're not going to just hand me an order and walk away. We're in this together. So starting from the very first meeting, starting with that mindset, we're partners, we're in it together. Here's your job, here's mine. All right, what's the recruiter's job? Very simple. That pipeline we've asked our manager to feed, we own that. All right, we have to be the ones to help that pipeline flow and to help navigate it and make sure, whether it's from a compliance perspective, whether it's from a no, we're not going to hire your cousin who's completely unqualified perspective, whatever it is, we're the ones as the recruiting professional that have to take some ownership of that pipeline and then managing the process. So managing who we're talking to, what we're talking about, when we're setting up those calls, how those calls and interviews are taking place. We really have to make sure that those things are flowing not only in accordance to kind of what works for us on our desk, but also what does your company say? You know, you may have rules and compliance issues and things like that. So really taking control of this is kind of how that's going to work for you. And this is what you can expect, Mr. or Ms. Hiring Manager. So a little bit more on that as well. But another very important thing that we can do is providing that competitive landscape. Yes, recognize that my engineering managers know engineers, that's great, but they may not necessarily know the dirty details of what our competitors are doing, what they're offering in terms of salary, what's coming, you know, what's the new product that they're working on they're going to launch. They may have some of that knowledge from just a purely engineering perspective, going back to that same example, but they don't necessarily know kind of the ins and outs that a lot of times we do because we're having a different conversation with candidates. We are talking about salary, we are talking about career growth, we are getting a better understanding of what a career looks like versus what kind of cool stuff are you guys building in C#. All right. One thing, of all the things that were very difficult for me, many things were, one thing that was especially hard was being able to admit that I am not the technical expert. I said earlier, I don't know anything about software development. I don't know anything about engineering. I could not, I would just be lost. You could put a gun to my head and sorry, I can't do it. I don't know it. I don't know these languages. I don't really, to be honest, have any desire to learn them. I like recruiting. I like what I do. So I recognize I'm not the technical expert. I know enough to understand the kinds of questions and the kinds of answers to the questions I should be getting from candidates, but I will also tell my hiring managers from day one, I can vet technically up to this level. At that point, I need you to be available and to have those deeper technical conversations and make sure that this person can really write the code that they say they can write, or they know the gap rules if they're an accountant or whatever it is. So, you know, obviously edit for your field, but it's okay to not be the expert. It's okay to not know how to write a line of code. That's not what we're paid for. That's not our job in this partnership. Our job is to do these other things. However, our job is to be the recruiting expert. You are not what I call a customer service recruiter. You shouldn't be, okay? Customer service recruiter is the one that shows up to a meeting, takes down the laundry list of ridiculous requirements that the hiring manager's asked for. Hiring manager runs away, you never see him again, and then the customer service recruiter is back at their desk, banging their head against the wall, banging out phone calls, sending spam, because all they know is they need somebody that matches up to these keywords and that they can get submitted to a VMS or an ATS. That's not a good partner. That's not a recruiting expert. Recruiting expert knows what they know, and they know how to recruit, how to engage, how to close, and they rely on their partners on the hiring team to do the technical stuff. So as much as I would tell you, don't be afraid to admit what you don't know, at the same time, don't be afraid to stand up for what you do. So that's all well and good. You know, we can put down these bullet points and we can say, hey, you're going to do this and I'm going to do that. But what are the actual questions that we need to have answers to? How can we really identify what those things are that are missing, and how do we make sure that we're both understanding our role in this partnership? It's by asking these questions. So these, again, some very specific things that I hope you'll be able to take back to your desk. And if you're not already asking, please start. And I think you'll open up a whole new level of engagement with your teams. So for the recruiter, do I really understand the profile? Again, not being technical, not being the person who's going to write code for you. Do I understand what I'm looking for in prospective candidates? Is there certain software languages that they have to understand? Are there languages that are similar that we could teach? C# and Java is a good example of that I've learned just in the last couple of years. Do I understand, is there a scale issue, right? My guys are building things that have billions of users. Do we need to look at other large companies, or do we need to look at other large-scale systems versus maybe small internal systems? So really, again, not understanding the nuts and bolts technical stuff, but understanding the scope of the profile. Do I have that much? And if I don't, am I going to continue to ask and continue to ask until I get it? Okay? Now I understand the profile. I know what I'm going to go look for. Have I established what the appropriate next steps are with the hiring team? A lot of discussion about how we treat candidates and making sure that, where we're following up and we're making that call every week and we're keeping, even if I don't know anything, I'm going to tell you I don't know anything. There's a lot of that stuff that flows in the candidate direction. What about the business direction? Do we not have the same responsibility to the hiring manager as well? And do we not need to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to touch base with you every week. I may not have a new candidate for you at that point. I may not have a lot to report, but you'll know that I'm still working on your behalf. You'll know that I haven't forgotten you. We need to have that flow going both ways. And I will also tell you, you need to be the one to set the cadence. You know your desk. You know what's realistic. You know how often you can actually spend time on this particular search versus the other 20 on your desk. You need to set that cadence up front. And if there's pushback, well, we'll talk about that later too. Do I have the tools that I need? Do I have access to the right job boards, anyone? Some of us use them. Do I have the right LinkedIn access? Do I use LinkedIn Recruiter? Are my people there? Things like that. So you've got to kind of figure that out. Is there something missing that would help me do this job better? And where do I need to go to get it? All right, what are the blockers? And so there you go. That's exactly the question. If I am missing a tool, if I do need something else that I don't have in my toolbox, can my business partners help me get that? There's a conference that I should attend. The commerce people from all these major companies that we're trying to recruit from are going to be there. I need to go to this event. I have to go to my business and say, spend $3,000 to send me to this thing. Can my business help justify that? Can they provide some context of who's going to be there, why we want to talk to them, and what our recruiting result could be by investing in this tool? So these are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking through and asking of your business. What should the hiring manager be asking themselves? Or what can you ask the hiring manager and help them start thinking about these things? Is there a process that I need to follow? One of the biggest frustrations, and I'm actually dealing with it this week, is where a hiring manager gets excited about a candidate, they want to move forward quickly, they want to make an offer. It's not that simple. There is a process. Fortunately, unfortunately, we have to check some boxes. So by having that discussion early on in the relationship building and then kind of going back to it and say, hey, I know you're really psyched about this person, but remember when we first met 6 months ago and we talked about this? Yeah, we still have to do that. It's an easier thing to push back on when you've already set that groundwork, as opposed to, what do you mean I've never heard this before? Why are you screwing me up with this candidate? So make sure that if there is a process involved, you know about it, you're talking about it, and you're gently reminding the manager when they need it. Does the manager know what they need? This kind of goes back to that initial discussion about what's my pain, what's the problem I'm trying to solve. Most hiring managers are going to have a laundry list of requirements. Customer service recruiters are going to say, oh, sure, I can find that for you. No, you cannot. Do you know why? Because that person doesn't exist, right? Remember when Ruby on Rails came out for the first time and everybody wanted people with 5 years of experience? It's impossible. We haven't invented time travel yet. So things like that, like know when you need to kind of push back and say, if I find somebody that has A, B, and C but lacks D, how does that feel to you? Have those conversations, get them thinking about where they can flex and what's negotiable, okay? And then finally, feeding that pipe, who do you know? Who would you rehire if you had the opportunity? Who did you work with when you were over at company A that you thought really did a great job? How can we get your team engaged? Is your team on social media? Do they have GitHub profiles? Are they doing any cool stuff in open source where they're working with other people? Get them talking about who do I know? Who do I want on my team? Who can I have my recruiter, my engaged partner, reach out to on my behalf and see if we can get some interest coming. All right? Flows right into leveraging that expertise, okay? We have to know what we're looking for. We have to have clearly defined set of expectations that say, I need someone with X amount of experience, preferably from a large company, but if they come from a small company, that's okay as long as they know this thing. These people generally are doing open source projects. I'm probably going to find some profiles on GitHub. Figure that out in partnership with your manager. It doesn't make you look ineffective or like you don't know what you're doing. It makes you look smart because you're asking for help from the people who can give it to you. Too often, we let our egos get in the way and think that we don't need help because we know how to scour the bowels of the internet with our, 5,000 character Boolean searches. Why? Why would you do that when you can pick up the phone and say, hey, so you were at this company a couple years ago. Who do you remember working with that was great? Or, hey, you were on this project and you partnered with this other team. Is there anybody over there we should talk to? Ask the question. Don't spend your time digging around in wacky, weird places in the internet. Just find out, where do we hunt? What are we hunting for? And now, great, we have a target. We have maybe a list of a potential pipeline. Let's talk messaging. Let's talk about how do I get this person's attention. So, funny story, I was in a meeting with a relatively large team. So it was a couple clicks above the manager and then all the managers for this one team. And, they weren't super thrilled with the pipeline, and we had done a lot of hiring and still had a lot more to do. And so I was kind of on the hot seat. And I was asked point blank, well, why don't you just send a bunch of in-mails? I get in-mails all the time from recruiters, and every day I have a new message from, all these big companies. And I was really kind of called out, and oh, okay, and which of those did you respond to, actually? Silence. Tell me what those in-mails said that compelled you to consider it or to respond so that I can start using that same messaging. Silence. All right, we have to know how to be able to kind of point that stuff back and get back to the point of what's really the strong messaging. And so let's talk more about that, Mr. Manager. If you were to get an in-mail or a text or a phone call or an email, whatever it is, doesn't really matter the tool, but let's talk about what that message is. What appeals to you? What do you want to hear? What would make you pick up the phone and take my call? Now, how can we take that bait and stuff it with the cool stuff your business is doing? So getting that messaging down and getting your hiring managers on board with the detail and the sell and the sizzle. You can create it. You're probably the more marketing person of the two of you, unless you're recruiting marketing people. But you really need their perspective. And this is something I say to my engineers all the time. And they're constantly amazed at how I take their wish list and I turn it into really cool copy. And they're like, wow, if I got an email like that, I'd definitely respond. So that's where we want to get to, okay? Those referrals, critical. Who do you know? Who do you want to work with? There's no shame in asking them to build the pipe because eventually these are going to be their coworkers and their directs. So yes, they have a dog in this fight. Top-down relationships is something I don't know that we talk enough about. So I won't spend a ton of time here, but I think it's important because there are some times where you're going to need to have that top-down influence. Okay? I think a lot of us are used to having that one-on-one interaction with a hiring manager. Joe needs a developer. He and I are going to work on this. We're going to ask each other these questions. We're going to develop strong messaging. He's going to show me his network. But does Joe really know that that's exactly what we need? Does Joe have the right profile? Does Joe understand the headcount implications? Having a relationship with Joe's boss, if not Joe's boss's boss, especially if you're partnering with a larger team or a larger company, you have to know from the top down, as high up the chain as you can get. You have to have a relationship there as well that can filter down into the day-to-day hiring managers. A lot of times I'll run into something that I can't push past, or I can't get someone to, understand the larger business implication why we do what we do. Sometimes I need to have that more senior person make the call. All right. So that's probably a discussion that is better for another time. How do we build that high-level relationship? Because it is a little different, but it is something to be mindful of. And how do I keep my eye on the larger business situation and not just the immediate hiring manager's hair on fire? All right. We have our pipe. We have some people to talk to. We've got strong messaging. I don't know about you guys, but I don't get a ton of applicants that I can really move forward with on a lot of jobs. How do I get my managers and the people I work with to focus on what we call sell calls as well as closing? I need help. I need someone. It takes a village, and I need someone to get on a call with a hot prospect and get them to talk to us or to engage in the interview process. How do I do that? Again, what's the pitch? Hopefully we've talked about this earlier. We know the sizzle. We've kind of figured out what's our strong messaging to get somebody. Is there a prospect that may respond better to manager outreach versus recruiter outreach? Another one of those things was really, really hard for me to let go. I didn't want my managers getting behind the curtain and getting involved with recruiting and putting their fingers in my pies. I didn't want them to do what I was doing. But then I realized that I actually got a lot more bang for my buck if I had some help. If I pulled back the curtain a little bit and I said, you can help me here. You can be compelling. I will help draft the message, but if you're the one to deliver it, I think this guy will respond to us. Can we do that? Can we spark the interest early by having an engineer talk to an engineer? Yeah, actually we can. And sometimes it's way more effective than any clever little line I could personally come up with, because again, I'm just the recruiter, okay? So be open to that. Think about that. How could that work? Do I have a manager or a contact on the team that can do a good sell job and can actually get somebody interested? Or is this person maybe super dry and not very exciting or inspiring? Maybe that's not the person we have on the sell call. Knowing when to woo versus when to interview. I have a team right now that struggles with this a little bit. They are wonderful partners. It's a great place to work, and it's a great team to work for, but they immediately kind of jump into interview mode, and sometimes that's not the right play. So some of the discussion that we continue to have is, hey, you're scheduled to talk to Mary on Tuesday. Can we talk a little bit about Mary's expectations and where she's at? Here's how I'd like you to approach her. I think if you say these things and not those things, she's going to react really positively to that. So being able to understand your candidate, when do we woo, when do we interview, and then getting your hiring managers on that same page by explaining that and asking those same questions can also help you convert prospects. So the more conversions you have, by the way, you're wondering what's the point of all this, the more wins you get, the more your managers are going to think you're a genius, all right? That's really the point of all this. It's okay to let go. I put this bullet in for me more than anybody else because I need a constant reminder. I don't have to control everything. It's okay to let other people help have these conversations and drive these things with our candidates. The more that you do that, again, the more wins you're going to get, the happier the hiring managers are going to be. So it all sounds really simple, right? We're all going to play nicely in the sandbox, and we're all going to do our part, and I know what my job is, and I've told the manager what his job is. What could possibly go wrong? Well, believe it or not, some managers are going to have a little skeptical eye in your direction. And they're going to say, Amy, I'm not buying that. I just need you to come over to my office 4 times a week, and I need you to review profiles with me for 2 hours a day. And we're going to send a bunch of spammy emails to all the people that I think have a good background. Now, is there anyone on the call, think about this amongst yourselves, that can spend 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, throwing up profiles on a slide and looking at hundreds of people over and over again? I don't have that kind of time. I also don't have the sensitivity to be able to really manage that appropriately and not tell people what I really think. It's gotten me in trouble before. So what do we do instead? You have to just accept that you're maybe possibly going to get some pushback. And I don't mean to get all defensive or come from a place of like, I'm ready to fight you, but just understand that in some cases we're asking managers and we're asking business partners to completely turn upside down their idea of recruiting. And they've maybe had customer service recruiters in the past, and now they're kind of looking at me going, you're a strategic what? No, that's not what recruiters do. So sometimes it's really re-educating them from the start what really is good consultative recruiting. And frankly, sometimes good consulting looks like really shitty customer service. I had a boss tell me that once, and it's probably one of the smartest things I've ever heard. But so again, just accepting there is a possibility I'm going to walk into some negative feedback here or some pushback, and here's how I'm going to get around it. Take it back to what is the business problem. You and I, Mr. Manager and me, we want the same outcome. We want to hire a great engineer who's going to come build cool stuff, who's going to stick around for a few years. That's what we're trying to get to. How do we get there? If we can agree that we're on the same page, that right there already kind of gets you on the same side of the board, right? So, okay, we're on the same team. I want to win. I know you want to win. We're on the same side. Okay, maybe we can win together. Let me think about this. Let me hear this person out. Okay? Just by assuming good intent, which is another favorite phrase of mine, it can really change your reaction. Earlier I mentioned like I don't always have that filter. I'm not always really good at doing this myself. I had a conversation once, true story, where I had a little bit of a heated exchange with a partner. This is some time ago, different life, but we had some head butting, and I finally just yelled into the phone that I wasn't going to walk into his office and start writing code, and he was certainly not going to come into my office and tell me how to recruit. Now, factual, perhaps, inappropriate completely, did not go over well. We have, fortunately, since we became great friends, made a lot of great placements together back then, but, this was someone that it really took some time to rebuild. I mean, we got pretty heated with each other, and it was not great for a few months there. But fortunately, the time we did work together, he's moved on now, was actually pretty great once we got past that. If I had stopped and taken a moment before I fired that off and thought, what is he really trying to do here? Are we on the same page with the business problem? Is he coming from a good place? He felt like he was saying, Amy, I'm going to spend hours with you every week. I'm going to stop doing my day job so that I can help you be better at yours, and you're yelling at me? Like, that's how he was taking my reaction. He couldn't believe that I was coming across so negatively because he thought by trying to get me to come do these, crazy meetings and spend all this time with him, that he was doing a good thing. In his mind, he had good intent. If I had taken a moment to really understand that and think that through, we could have come to a much better place much sooner. So, that said, though, there are going to be times when you have to stand your ground. The way we do it and how we react to things makes all the difference. Firing off an angry email or stomping into someone's office to complain, these are not necessarily the right approaches. This is something I learned over time as well and continue every single day to work on. All right? If you need to vent and you need to just call somebody and say, oh my gosh, this person is a complete asshat, I cannot possibly do this, I will give you my number after the call. You and I can have those conversations every day if we need to. Don't have the conversation with your boss's boss, your hiring manager, or your hiring manager's boss, unless you have that kind of relationship. Think about how to stand your ground, how to do it appropriately, but again, always going back to that, I'm going to assume that you're coming from a good place, and let's bring this back to the problem we're trying to solve. Okay? How do I do that? If you are working with anyone who is data-driven, think numbers, think figures and facts. With engineers, that's my life right now. Facts and figures are your friend. This saved my life. So this is actually a true story. This absolutely happened. These are real slides that I created for a business that I was struggling with. It was a new business for me, a new client for me. And I go into this first meeting with the leadership team, very excited because I was going to change the way we do. I was going to disrupt recruiting, right? Isn't that what everybody's talking about these days? We're going to disrupt recruiting and it's going to be great. Yeah, not so much. They were used to recruiting a certain way. So again, kind of going back to that, let's spend hours and hours like looking at profiles and let's review every single applicant that comes through our ATS, and even the ones that aren't qualified, we don't care. We still want to see them. I mean, there's a lot of this kind of discussion and just a lot of work that was not getting us anywhere. I mean, we literally had no hires. And so I went to leadership team all fired up. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to make things so much better. You're going to love me in 3 months. And I asked the question, can we do things my way? Here's my process. Here's what you can expect from me. I went through the whole, the deck I just showed you earlier with the whole thing. This is what you could expect from me. This is how we'll meet. Let's do things my way for 3 months. If you are not satisfied with the outcome, if I have not made the hires that you want to make, if I have not shown you the candidates that you want to see, we will go back to your way. But I believe in my process. I believe in my work. I believe in what I do. I was told absolutely not, under no circumstances. We're not going to do that. It doesn't work. I need you to do things my way, according to the manager. Well, how do you really come up against that? how do you just, I mean, you're at an impasse, right? You're saying no, and he's saying no. So we can stand there and just look at each other and say no, but then nothing's getting done. You're the new kid who isn't playing nicely in the sandbox, and it really kind of creates a mess. So what do you do? Well, I'll tell you what you do. You work your ass off for 3 months and you do both. Okay? Good buddy of mine, guy named Paul West. He's amazing. I worked with him for a short time, but we we went through the fire together, buddy. He helped me during this process. He was a sourcer who was directly aligned to my groups. And so we partnered together on this and we created these slides together. And this is literally what we came up with. We did a shortened version of the work we were being asked to do. I met him halfway. I said, I appreciate you're not going to just say no. You're not going to give me what I want. I can't give you what you want. Let's meet in the middle. I will give you this. I said, we will do half of what you're asking for. We will have these meetings, but only half the time, so on. You get the idea. At the same time, we are going to do the work that we would normally do. We won't be able to do as much because we will have more limited time because we're spending so much time with you. But we're still going to do some of the what we call real recruiting. That's my term, not the term I used in the meeting. And we'll kind of see where we're at in 3 months. So, okay, fine. We're all tentatively in agreement, and everyone's kind of holding their breath, waiting for the other person to screw up. This is what we came up with. We've decided this actually might have been a 60-day thing now that I think of it. But anyway, we spent this time, we did these 2 different kinds of recruiting, if you will. The sessions where we were with the managers and kind of going through just random profiles and just really not targeted sourcing like we've been taught to do resulted in us actually reaching out to 92 candidates. We only heard back or were able to engage with 23 of those. So, your mileage may vary. That may be great odds for some people. I personally thought it was kind of crappy. I like a much higher bang for my buck, but, again, it is what it is. We ended up presenting 23, so people that we actually got to talk to, actually got to fully screen and vet for our team. sent everybody, because we've already decided you like what you see in the resume, we're going to screen them and send them to you. So everybody got submitted to the business. Out of that 23, 14 of those went through what we call a technical screen, which is basically step one in the interview process. Only 4 of those made it to an interview loop. We did not make a single offer. So imagine the amount of time that was spent between myself, my recruiting partner, Paul, the business, all the players involved to ultimately have 0 offers. It was disheartening to say the least. You figure all of these phone calls are at least an hour. The prep work, the writing up, the profile, all the stuff that we've done just to get here, and we had no hires. It was really deflating. So I went back to the team and I shared this information and I said, look, here's the result from process A. Now I have results from process B. So again, at the same time, we're kind of walking through this, what I like to call real recruiting. We're strategically looking at potential candidates. We're looking at profiles that we think I might be able to do something with this person. Okay. We went ahead and submitted, we found, screened, and submitted 33 candidates during this time. Did we look at a lot more profiles? Yeah, but on your own time as a single recruiter at your desk sourcing, you can get through those pretty quickly. You guys know this, 6-second resume scan or whatever, right? We know maybe it's not exactly that number, maybe it's a little higher, but we know we can kind of quickly vet through profiles and only present to the business the ones that we know are going to be a fit. That's where we get the 33 from. These are people that were screened, vetted through the process. We know they would be interested in our company. We know we can afford them, all that good stuff. Out of those 33, almost half, or just over half, actually went through an interview loop. We actually got half of the people that we screened and submitted to a full interview. Out of that 17, we made 6 offers, resulting in 5 hires. 5 hires. One person did turn us down, so that happens. The amount of business investment that we got from this was so much shorter because they really only had to deal with the 33. They didn't have to look at the 92 and then hope that they got some of the 92, ended up getting 23, which resulted in blah, blah, blah. You guys saw the numbers. It was, here are 33 candidates over the span of time that you can actually take action on, that are actually ready to interview. We don't have to worry about wooing them. We don't have to worry about all these other things. We can move on them. And it opened everyone's eyes. I mean, they all sat there and looked at this, and I remember Paul and I kind of looking at each other like, yeah, we were really proud of this work and what we had come up with. So, again, like I said, it speaks for itself. Answer my questions. Give me the information that I need up front that we had talked about. Give me the detail, you own this part of the pipe, I'll own this part of the pipe, all these things that we did up front, we were able to do on a very abbreviated and kind of almost hostile way with a business who didn't totally believe us. These were the results we were able to get. So again, you can see a really clear difference between, how many candidates we were just looking at profiles versus actually vetting. I did also include internals because that was a big hiring source for this team as well. And so you can even see, look, there were tons of internals that you guys talked to, and no hires there either. All of the hires during this particular time span came from the work that Paul and I had done. And we were so proud of that, but not in a ha-ha, I told you so kind of way, but just in a way that was like, listen, we want the same outcome, clearly. We want to hire people, obviously. Help us do this even better next time. Help us double those numbers next time. So without getting into the emotion of it and how it makes me feel and you're a big jerk, like forget all that. Let's just look at the detail and remind ourselves how we got to this great work in the first place. Okay? We went from a really hostile but yet with the best intentions partnership to one that said, how do we help you do that better? These were great results. We love what we see here. These 5 people are awesome. How do we get more of them? What's the work that needs to be done? So going back to, again, what is that business problem we're trying to solve for? Talking through the partnership, what I need from you, what you're going to get from me, honesty, transparency, and follow-up. That's what will get you to the win. So what can you at your desk right now do today? Here's the questions, all right? First thing I do with new hiring managers, I actually have this on a slide that I sometimes share with them for the ones that have a good sense of humor. Goes over pretty well. Thank you, Talent42, for the t-shirt. What has worked well for you with previous recruiters? This is such a powerful question because usually we're not the first one, right? Unless this person is a brand new manager who has never hired before, and that's a whole other set of problems you're going to have. But assuming that they have had recruiting partners in the past at other companies or even, before you came along, what did you like? What did the person before me do that really made you feel like you had a voice or that you were getting the results you wanted? Are those things that I can learn from and I can implement into my day? Maybe there's things that I'm not doing that I should start doing, not just for you, but for my other hiring managers. So let's talk about what you've really enjoyed. If there's nothing, or maybe it's all been just terrible, where have we failed? What have we not done for you that you felt like we should have, or where have we maybe dropped the ball? And I know if you were to poll my hiring managers, they'd probably have some answers to that. They'd probably say, I wish Amy would have done this or not that. So start peeling back those layers as well and get to the root of what you love, what you hate, and what I can do to try to meet you, in a good place with both of those things. You're going to get unreasonable requests. You just are. It's inevitable. We're going to have unreasonable requests of them. It's just the way it is. So when you get those kinds of pushback, or you get, whether it's way too many meetings, or we want to look at every single applicant, that's an old favorite, things like that, help me understand how this solves the problem. You and I identified the problem as this, we need this senior person who has large company experience, whatever it is, whatever the business problem is we've defined. How does spending time on this activity or that process get us closer to this solution? A lot of times it just doesn't. So that's where you get to come back and say, but if we do this, that's how we will get closer to that solution. So be able to speak to that and really be prepared for the things that you're proposing to be able to explain how that comes to a positive outcome and how it gets to really what we all want, which is a great hire. That's it, right? I don't think there is a hiring manager out there who at the end of the day really cares where a candidate came from or how many lunches it took to get the person to take the offer. What they care about is they have now filled the position, this work is going to get done, their team is not going to be overloaded. Bring it back to the result that you're driving for, and the rest of the details don't have as much significance. All right, so I hope this was helpful. Again, lots of questions probably that you may have for me, or if this is really your opportunity now to ask me questions, or let's talk about it, like what's worked for you, what hasn't worked, what you want to dig into. This is your time.
And we have a few already set up.
Awesome.
Of course. So I have a question from, I'm going to guess you spelled your name wrong, and it's not garlic, but it's Eric, since I've been talking to you on Twitter this whole time. So here's the situation. Working with a remote hiring manager, waiting for approval of a job description to post and start hiring for 3 roles with them.
Okay.
It sounds like just they're not getting the hiring manager to even start the ball rolling. And
okay, so like not getting a rec open or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so first of all, you have to kind of understand, and I think most traditional organizations are going to be like this, right, where there is a policy, and because of compliance issues for whatever, we literally can't do certain activity without an open rec. So it's a very simple, and I would say this is where you need to have a lot of visibility as well, maybe looping in your manager or the overall business lead or somebody, so that you're saying, hey, I'm super excited, and maybe it's an email so that it's tracked, right? So you have it in writing. I can't wait to partner with you on this. I have some great ideas about where we can find good people or how we can, move this forward. Unfortunately, I'm stuck because without an open position, I can't start these cool activities, whatever that may be. If we don't have something open, I'm going to assume this isn't a priority and I'm going to go work on some other things. So you might want to wordsmith that a little bit, right? You don't want to come across as a jerk. But
Right.
I think you need to be very clear and just say, I'm super excited about this. I think this sounds like a great job and I'm happy to work with you. But if you're not opening the position or you're not doing whatever the process is, then I'm going to take that as, that this isn't priority. And so I'm going to go work on other priority things. And just be very kind of blunt about it, like in a really nice way, though.
Right. And there is a balance, right? I think also, building that rapport over time, you can hopefully have that conversation where, like, look, we're doing this.
Mm-hmm. I have flat out told, I have some managers in that same vein. I know we're short on time, but I have some managers in that same vein where they've come to me and said, I need to hire a bunch more people. Okay, well, just so you know, when I go to my one-on-one with my boss, she looks at my rec load, and if your name's not on it, I don't get to talk to you. And that a lot of times will spur activity as well.
Good call. Okay, so Kim Ramos has a question about just, engaging recruiters. And I think you answered this, but maybe a little more detail can help her specific issue. So she was asking about creating a message for the manager to send out on your behalf, which I know you mentioned that you do.
Yeah.
But I think where she's having trouble is actually convincing them that works. She said she's getting some resistance about the engagement step. So what advice do you have for her?
So you can meet in the middle. I have also had managers who really struggled with this. So what I have done is said, listen, I'm going to write this and I'm going to need you to okay it. Like, here's my little blurb, here's my comment, whatever. I'm going to copy you on this email. The prospect needs to know, and this is the value in having you, the manager, send it. The prospect needs to know that there's a real live engineering manager behind the scenes who desperately wants someone for this seat. I understand you're not comfortable doing that outreach yourself, but I'm going to copy you on it so that they know there's a real life person, and I'm going to offer you up as someone to ask questions to, okay? And they're like, okay. And that's, sometimes that's a happier medium. And then oftentimes what you get is the response from the prospect that says, great, Amy and Joe, great to meet you. I'd love to hear more. What's the next step? Now we've got them hooked. I can still, as a recruiter, kind of get in front of it and own that, and then, drive the conversation for the manager. But sometimes just having them on the loop, so to speak, can help. Another thing that I do, I've really pushed my teams to build out their social media profiles. So LinkedIn specifically, but those that are on Twitter and so on as well. A lot of them are really uncomfortable with that. I've got a whole other presentation about pimping your profile, which courtesy of some of the folks I work with who've done it as well. I have basically told them, put my email in your profile. If you want to know more, bother my recruiter, Amy. Here's her contact info. Like, I'm okay with that. But what it is it's creating that idea in the prospect's mind that there's a real live manager behind the scenes that I could actually talk to. Because don't you know, recruiters are just nasty gatekeepers getting in your way, right? So now we're taking down that barrier.
Oh, for sure. I love that. I think that's a really smart idea, and I love the idea of teaching people to pimp their profile. I don't think a lot of people know how.
It's a whole other process.
Right?
Yeah. Or do it for them in some cases.
Right. Been there, done that. Okay. So Robert Agnew has a question that I think is a really unique one. So best practices for handling a hiring manager who's never hired before. What are kind of 3 things that you want to make sure they know from the get-go?
It's a double-edged sword because you have this brand new, like, virgin clay that you can kind of mold into whatever you want.
Right?
But anyone who's raised children also knows that at some point children are kind of, you're supposed to mold them and build them and, welcome to the terrible twos. Anybody? So I think understand that this is going to be brand new to them and fight the urge to talk down to them. It is really easy to feel like, finally, someone I know something more than they do. It's really easy to take that stance, and that's a big negative. That's only going to make you look like a jerk. So respect. So number one, fight the urge to do too much, and take too much ownership and talk down to them and just be, like, oh, I'm the smart one in the relationship. Don't do that. Number two, continue to drive everything back to the business problem we're trying to solve. That's for anybody, but I think especially important here. Does the manager, I'm assuming brand new manager, really understand what their problem is? And finally, their perspective is probably really critical because they were once someone who could have been a prospect just a week ago, right? If they're newly promoted or they're, newly into this position, you were just recruited yourself. How did that work? What did we do right? What did you like? So especially if they're coming from another company or something, oh my gosh, there's so much gold to be mined there.
Totally. And I want to ask this one last question, even though we only have 1 minute from Cheryl, because I think it's a really good one. What's the follow-up action that you put into that email when the hiring manager sends it? So her site, at the end she said, our recruiter, Jane Doe, would like to begin discussions, you can contact her, kind of thing. Or, what's the next step when they send it?
Yeah, so, hopefully if you're not copied on that mail, which that's, kind of earlier what I said in reverse, you'll know what's going on. Otherwise, it's really kind of up to the manager to follow up with you. So I do have a tracking. I just, drop candidate names into a spreadsheet or prospect names. When I have my regular sync, weekly, biweekly, whatever, with the manager, I'll be like, hey, you sent a message to, Mary Sue. Did you ever get a response? No? Okay, fine. And then, we're on to the next or whatever. So there's not really a ton of action for you other than to keep the manager honest and, where's this at? Did we get a response? That kind of thing.